Welcome to another edition of By Design, where we believe business should be run by design and not by chance. I'm here again with my trusted sidekick, Dale Thrush. Hey, Dale.
Hey, Marty, how are you today?
Doing great. And I'm glad we got together again and we get to do another edition.
Yeah, I'm always excited to talk about some of this stuff and share our information. I will say up front, I'm playing a little injured today, got a little bit of cold or something, so if you hear me sniffle, cough, I apologize in advance, but it's not going to dampen my enthusiasm for the topic today.
Well, good. Well, today we're going to dig into something unique called the 4 C's. And we had just learned about this. Probably intuitively, we knew these existed. But as we started really studying, exit planning and companies, the concept of the 4 C's came up. Can you talk or share with us what the 4 C's are?
Yeah. First, the 4 C's are human capital, customer capital, structural capital, and social capital. So when we talk about the 4 C's, everything in a business kind of falls into one of those 4 buckets.
Okay. And it's interesting because one of the statistics that we learned, and I think, again, a lot of these intuitively we know it until it's said, and it really kind of brings it to light, but that 80% of a company's value is tied up in these 4 C's.
Yeah, it's one of those, when you first hear it, you're shocked, but when you think about it more, it makes sense. When somebody buys a company or what makes a company valuable, it's not really the computers and the desk and even the product. It's the people that are inside that office that make a business valuable.
Yeah, and I think when we looked at that and we said that 80% of a company's value is tied up in the 4 C's and it's not on the balance sheet, it kind of hit you at first because when we think of business, we think of valuations and we think how they're again valued, we always think it's in the balance sheet. Let's go to the finances. But in actuality, it's way more than that.
Yeah, if you think about it, most people probably, if they've never sold a company, never done this, just assume it's a spreadsheet exercise, right? You kind of list the assets, you list the risk, and you do a mathematical formula, and it says yay or nay. But with these 4 C's, it's not that easy, right? You have to dig into them a little bit and go do some discovering on where the risks are and what you're doing well.
Right. One thing I thought about is not all of the 4 C's, though, are probably weighted equally. And so let's talk through each one. And let's probably start with the easiest one is structural.
Yeah, structural, and I'm with you. And if anyone follows me on LinkedIn, you know which C I think is the most important, and we'll get to that one. But structural capital is basically just your system and processes that you have in place. Is it a legacy system? Is it an out-of-box system? Is it a proprietary system?
Yep.
That's kind of the stuff they're looking at. One thing I would recommend under the structural capital piece, though, is payroll. How are you paying people? Your taxes, because that's a red flag that gets a lot of people in trouble.
Yeah, I think sometimes we look at, and I know from our standpoint, we used a PEO to manage our payroll, and through our acquisition was super easy because by having that third party, all of our taxes were taken care of, our, unemployment insurance, our 401k. So, again, people look at that. These are fairly easy to look at. Do you have processes? But again, it's something that's important to have.
Yeah, definitely have to do it. They're the experts in workers' comp and all that stuff. So it just checks that box real quick and easy when you start to head down your exit path. It's also emails, sales databases, customer relationship management stuff. So all of them are very important to have, but I do think that PEO to keep your finances straight and I's dotted, T's crossed are very important.
I would say this, though. I don't think anybody creates a competitive advantage in their systems, right? Everybody has ERP. They have CRM. Question is, are you using them or not? Can you create a competitive advantage? I'm not quite sure. Let's talk about the second one that I think is important is client. And again, I think this one is fairly easy to assess, but it's so important. Let's talk about how the client is measured in valuation.
Yeah, again, I mentioned a little earlier about there's one that I think is the most important. I think client's probably 1B, right? This is your how many customers do you have? What do your contracts look like? What's your revenue generators? Is it all from one person at one company, or is it across a multitude of customers? Is it all mom and pops, or is it big multinationals? So this really deep dives into just how you're generating your revenue, your contracts, that sort of stuff.
Right. I mean, I think that it's interesting when you get to clients because everybody's really proud of their clients and they're proud of the names. But what are the red flags? Like when you go into a company, what tend to be the red flags that you see when you look at client lists?
A couple of big ones, I think, are who owns the client relationship. A lot of times when we go in, it's the owner that owns all the relationships with the client, which you may think, well, as an owner, I should be involved and I should own those. But that's a red flag to a potential buyer because obviously you're going to exit the business when you sell, and now all those relationships, they have to be rebuilt. Another one is how much, again, percentage of revenue generated by client. If you have 90% of your annual revenue from one client, that's going to be a red flag to people. They like to see a more diversified portfolio of, no more than 5, 10, 15% being driven by one client.
Right. I think sometimes we think about client lists and we think about famous names or that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it really is the diversity of that client list. And again, we were just in a meeting, you and I, meeting with a client. And one of the things they told us was that 90% of their revenue came from one client. And the person that owned that relationship left the organization and took it with them. Can you imagine losing 90% of your revenue?
It makes for some tough conversations around the leadership table, doesn't it? Because you're going to have to cut heads, and I mean you're going to have to really go into survival mode at that point.
Right. And so I think as you look at your client list, the one thing that always is around diversity, that we're not tied to any one client in the distribution. And the second thing you again talked about was the owner. And I know I was guilty of this, is we get really prideful of our relationships. We want to talk about how great salespeople we are. And what I found when I heard this a long time ago, somebody said, you have to back up. You can't be the hero of the story. And at first, I kind of took it personally, but what I realized was ultimately if we were going to grow the business and drive value, I had to step back. And one of the things I remember is when I started turning things more over, man, I wanted to get on that phone and I wanted to get involved. And I used to go to my office and I would literally sit and twiddle my thumbs because no matter how bad I wanted to pick up that phone, I knew I couldn't do it. I had to let my team do it.
And it's a challenge because usually the owners probably built that relationship over multi-years. How do you transition that relationship now to someone else?
Right.
And it's not something that's going to happen overnight, which again, you have to do it by design. You can't allow your relationships with your customer just to transition by chance.
No. And so again, if we're looking for that, we have to look at those. The third one, which is always interesting, is social. And, let's talk a little bit about the social capital.
Yeah, social kind of combines all three of these into one. It's what is your brand? You talk about your leadership brand all the time. You talk about it in your book. What is your company's brand? And it's what people in the marketplace think of you. So, people talk, employees talk to other people interview and go through a process, people review you online, and it's all those things that get wrapped into one. And are you a company someone wants to work for or not?
Right.
And most companies don't think about this. They just kind of think they can't control it, that it is what it is, but that's not the case.
Yeah. One of the things, again, as you mentioned, as I write a lot about as leadership brand, is what your team says about you when you're not in the room. And a lot of it was taken from Jeff Bezos, who said a company's brand is what they say about when you're not in the room. And if you think about it, it's so important that when we manage that, are we easy to do business with? Are we friendly? Do we get shit done? Let's be honest, right? People want to know you get things done. Are we on time? Are we on budget? All of those things go into brand.
Yeah, and it's literally everything. It's your interview process. It's your employee value proposition. It's do you do what's right or do you do what's in the contract? That's a big thing we see, right? You may be legally right saying, well, it's in the contract. That's what we agreed to do. But then that client then goes and tells 10 people how awful you are to work with. You just kind of hit your social capital in a negative way.
Yeah, I guess I got to tell this story, but my wife was looking for a new dress. And she went and bought the dress from this company for our son's wedding. And when she got it, it wasn't the same color as the model that she looked at. And it was too blue. And she said, I cannot wear blue. And you know what the owner kept saying to us? Well, you know you have a contract. You know you can't return it. You have a contract. I swear in a conversation, I heard it 10 times, you have a contract. And all it did was piss me off when in actuality, she'd say, well, I really want you to feel better and I want you guys to be happy. But all you kept saying is the contract. And that's, I mean, I'm talking about it now. And so when I look at that dress company's brand, do you think I think they care about me or do they only care about their contract?
Yeah, and that's exactly what that's a perfect example of social capital, right? Legally, yes, we have a contract. But now that's your social brand is, okay, well, they're just going to do by the contract, so don't go there because you're going to be stuck in a contract.
Yeah, I mean, you might have one and it may come down to that, but is that the first thing you say? And so to me, I think brand is so important. And what happens is I also think one thing that I would say when we talk about brand is we try to make sentences or tell me about the brand and we get really lengthy. I always like to say, just give me 5 words. 5 simple words that describe your brand. When you hear your company's name, what do you think your clients say? What are those 5 words? And I think when you do it, you now get an indication of really where you stand in the social atmosphere.
Yeah, and let me give you one more example of social capital. Everyone knows we had a good co-op program with Clemson University, and so for those that don't know, basically they have 2 interview days a year. You go down there, you sign up, you have to pre-register, students sign up to talk to you, blah, 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 blah. I totally forgot to sign up one one session, and we needed some co-ops. And my phone started ringing from the head of the co-op department in a panic saying, I've got all these kids asking to talk with you. You guys aren't signed up. Like they're banging down my door wanting to know if you're coming. Are you guys coming? And I just had to say, oh, yeah, I totally forgot. Can you squeeze us in? Because he was like, well, the spots are all taken. He goes, we'll get you a table.
Yeah.
To me, that is this kind of social capital we're
Right.
shooting for.
Right. And it's, again, it's just one of those big pieces I think starts to go to value, but there's a reason that brand gets developed, and standing on its own and saying, this is the brand I want isn't going to happen. And I think this gets to the 4th C, which, as most people know, is our favorite, the human capital side, the people side.
I've always said you win with your people. Your people are your competitive advantage. You mentioned earlier, can you create a competitive advantage in your processes? I don't think so. Not really. You can in your social capital, but it's more indirect, right? Like it's basically your people. If your people are going out and being evangelists for your company and how awesome and great and fun it is, and your clients are happy and they're telling their people how great and awesome and wonderful you are, you take care of your social capital. But yeah, human capital, I think it's where the battle's won and lost.
Yeah. I was an interview with Howard Schultz, right? Howard Schultz started Starbucks. And when they asked him about the business and they asked him about what made him successful, and he said, we may be selling coffee, but we're in the people business. Like the great companies understand it's not about product. It's not about logos. It's not about all this fancy stuff. It still boils down to your people.
You do. I mean, think about let's take that a step farther. You have the best coffee in the world. Like you've cracked the code. They still have to interact with a person to get that coffee. And if that person they interact with is just grumpy and mean and hates being there because you treat them like crap, like, do you think that person's going to have a positive experience with your coffee? No, they're going to go to the store next door that maybe doesn't have as good a coffee, but the experience is so much better. And that's what I say, you win with your people.
Yeah, I love it. And so I think we want to dig in a little bit more about this people side. And I heard a statistic, and to be honest with you, it's kind of alarming to me, but it said 71% of employees don't believe their leaders can lead them to the next level. And I was kind of floored by that.
Yeah, that's you mentioned that just the other day to me, and I was the same way, shocked. Like I'd have to dig into that more to figure out why. But there's a lot of bad leaders out there. I shouldn't say bad, but there's a lot of me-focused leaders out there. And when you have me-focused leaders, I can't really blame other people for not having faith in them sacrificing to get the team to where it needs to go.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time in definitions of leadership, and I talk about it in the book and everything else. But I think the thing that hit me more in its simplest, the simplest piece around leadership is that you believe in we versus me. And I think the me part is what's really starting to hurt us. And I think it went back even to the client discussion where we said the owner thinks it's about me. I'm the winner. I'm the hero of the story. And when I am, it really turns off people.
Yeah, I mean, who wants to work in that environment? A me environment is going to be all about individual performance. It's all going to be, I need to succeed at your expense, right? At Voco, you guys did a great job, and I think it was you that said it once, or Steve. Basically, you said we all eat steak or we all eat salad. There was no you people get steak, you get salad. It was we either all eat steak or we all eat salad. And to me, that's the first step, right? Like, what are you rewarding? What do you value? I know everyone has value, cool little words on their walls, but what do you truly what you truly value is what you reward.
Right.
Most companies I've worked for, what do they reward, right? Individual performance. So you can say teamwork, you can say all this other stuff, but if I get rewarded for stabbing Marty in the back and producing a little bit more and I get promoted, everyone's going to look around and be like, okay, I guess I got to do the same thing if I want to stay here.
Well, let's dig into that one a little bit because I think it's interesting. Like, would we ever put that on the board? Have we ever been into a company where we said we reward stabbing in the back, right? Or we reward over individual I can't even say the word, billable as opposed to unbillable. But those should be in because every day we watch companies and people stab them in the back. And when we talk to the leaders, they're like, well, they were just, getting the job done, or they make up some crazy thing. And so it really is insane.
I had an experience once in my career. Every company will say people are their biggest priority, that we care about them more than anything else. And really 5% of companies should just put on their wall, we value profits, right? So I was at a manufacturing plant and we had been running overtime 7 days a week for months and months and months. And Christmas week was supposed to be kind of slow. So the plant manager called an all hands meeting, made a big deal about how he was going to give everybody Christmas Eve, Christmas Day off because we've been working so hard and they've just earned it and blah, blah, blah. Well, come to find out, one of our biggest clients dropped an emergency order on us the week of Christmas. Guess what the plant manager did?
Probably had to bring everybody into work.
Guess where I was Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. They called him. So what's that tell the employees? Does that tell the employees, yeah, I care about y'all and people?
No.
It means widgets out the back door will always take precedent. And if that's fine, just say it. At least people can make the decision whether they stay or go based on you being honest.
Yeah. But it is sort of that line. It probably goes back to that 71%, statistic is they say you're the most important thing in the world. People are important to us. We believe in work-life balance. And then they go and pull that stunt. Because what they should have just told the client is, no, our people need 2 days off. They need it. We want them to have it. We'll get to your order. Because at the end of the day, do you think it really mattered to the company that those things got done?
I doubt it. I doubt it. And some of these bigger companies, when you're in that automotive world, they just do it just because they can, right? Because no one will tell them no. So, yeah, it's again, say it, reward whatever you want, but just understand what you reward is what you value.
Right. And so I think we need to, as we talk about this piece, we really have to start thinking about that. And so one of the things that, as you start to pull the human capital side together, it really boils down to, is the owner the only one driving this stuff, or is there actually a leadership team? And do you want to talk a little bit about building an operating board or a leadership team and why that's important?
Yeah, and I would say that's, in my opinion, the number one piece of the human capital that companies are looking for is there a team that will stay on board and can be able to continue the growth and success that you guys have created, right? If it's just the owner and he or she's gone, then there's nobody really to carry on that performance. So you need that cohesive, whether you call it a leadership team, we call it an operating board. You have to have that next gen group ready to go. And again, that's not a team you should leave to chance. A lot of people are like, well, I'll just promote my 10 best performers and that's my new leadership team.
Right.
Probably not the best strategy to build that team.
No, I think what we found, and I know in our organization, for us to be able to drive the value and to grow the company, again, me and Steve and Paul, we couldn't do it by ourselves. We're not either that smart or that good. And so what we recognized early on was the key to growth was to build an operating board. Now, the reason we called it an operating board is I always hated to say it was a leadership team because that meant other people weren't leaders. And quite frankly, everybody in our organization is a leader. And it's important for them to recognize that it's not about leadership, it's not about title, but about having influence. And whatever you do, you're a leader. So we ended up calling it the Advoco Operating Board because every day we operated in that manner. And to us, these were the key people that were going to not only carry the mission on, but also be the care and feeding to all the people below.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to execution at the end of the day, right? You can have $1 billion idea, even though I think you say there's no such thing as $1 billion idea, but it comes down to execution. And an owner can't execute everything. They can't execute sales, marketing, finance, hiring, performance management, promotions, career advancement, all that stuff by themselves, right? They need help executing their vision, their strategy, and that's where this cohesive leadership team, operating board, again, whatever you want to call it, really comes into play and is important.
Yeah. And so I think as we kind of wrap up the 4 C's, and we've talked about structural, we've talked about the clients, we've got into the social aspect, while we believe the people side is important, if there's one thing you take away, and it's one thing as we work with organizations, we're going to go inside them and we're going to ask about their leadership team or their operating board. And again, what I find in most companies is they don't actually have a team they trust. That if the owner could take 2 months away, is he comfortable doing it? Or is he going to come back and say, I go away 2 months and you guys screw everything up?
Yeah, I'm going to say something that might freak some business owners out too. The team that got you here may not be the team that gets you there. And that's hard. You have some folks that help you build it up, and they were there first of the days, bootstrapping, when things were hard.
Yeah.
But as you look to where you want to go, they may not have the best skills profiles that can get you where you need to go. And not to plug at something else, but that's why we do profiles. We are big into profiles and making sure you're hiring people with the right skills, traits, characteristics to do the job you want them to do.
Right. No, I think that's important. And I love that you brought that up, right? The people that got you here may not be the people that get you there. And that's what gets a lot of companies in trouble because, look, we have a lot of loyalty to people in the early days, right? Most likely in the early days, we're all a bunch of warriors. We're all just knocking stuff out. We're getting it done. But at some point in time, that curve has to change. We have to get away from the hero mentality to the guide mentality. And so as we do that, some people are going to have to change out. I know we faced it a lot. We've had a number of just incredibly great team members that got us to a point. But as we started the transition, that became one of our biggest battles, is getting those people to transition from hands on the keyboard to now being a leader.
And it's a completely different skill set, right? Just because I'm a great widget builder may not mean I'm going to be a great leader of widget builders. And I think that's where companies miss the mark a little bit. We usually promote the person who's performing the best. We just promote that person, and it may not be the right profile skill set that we need to get to where we want to go.
Right. And again, I think in this session, I don't think we can delve into as you talk about building profiles. We do a lot with personality assessments. I think, we've made it known that our 2 favorite tests are the DISC profile and the working genius, and how those play into building your team. But do you just want to touch a little bit on it, and then we'll get into deeper details in our next session?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the DISC and Working Genius. And the DISC profile, I call that my communication GPS. It's how someone likes to interact with the world around them, how they make decisions, how they are in social situations, things like that. The Working Genius is what part of the workflow do they just naturally love to do. So that's my talent GPS. So Again, there's no right or wrong to any of these. There are more preferred profiles for a certain role over another role. And that's where we'll get into this in another episode on how to use all these. But it just allows you, again, to be very intentional when you're building your teams. Where are the gaps? What skills do we need on the team? Where do we have holes? And we can fill those holes to make a better overall team.
Right. I mean, I think if there's any takeaway, we believe in doing these personality assessments, whatever they are. There's the Enneagram, there's Myers-Briggs, there's Strength Finders. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. Again, we love DISC and Working Genius just because they're very simple, and as our core value is, we believe in simplicity over complexity. And if I can't do it on the back of a napkin, I never liked it. So we'll dig in further. Anything else you'd like to just say around the 4 C's or last minute comments?
A healthy organization needs strong C's, all 4 of them. But again, time and resources are limited. So which ones are the big levers? And I think I would really focus on that human and client C's to start. If you don't know where to start, dig into those 2 and go from there.
80% of your value is tied up in these 4 C's. I think it's time you dig into it. We think it's that important. So again, we look forward to digging further. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We love talking about this. And for now, Dale, thanks again for another great session.
Yeah, thank you. Till next time.